it's Cameron Johnson presenting the Yemen Civil War, the worst humanitarian crisis you've never heard of. And this is especially true here in the United States, where this war is barely covered, if at all. You go on BBC, you do see articles about the war, but you go on CNN, you watch the news on a daily basis, not a single word. I know this is true because my parents do watch the news on a daily basis, and when I asked them if they've heard about this war, they had no idea. And that is like really startling to me. So the first problem, I think this is really huge, is that this is just so relatively ignored. And it's a problem because there's 18.8 million people in need. The war has severely damaged the people's abilities to import food and have clean access to clean water and access to even shelter. So there's 18.8 million people in need, surpassing the amount of people in need in Syria by 5 million. By 5 million people. And 10.3 of those 18.8 million people are in acute need, meaning that if they don't get assistance in food, water, shelter, etc., they have a relatively high chance of dying. They are on the brink of death if they don't have food. They will starve to death, they will die of dehydration. They need this. So the war itself, how did this happen? Why are we here? Why are things so bad? Well, the Houthis, they're a Shia group in the north that rose up against the Hadi government, which is the blue. The Houthis are the red, and the government's the blue in this map. And this map is very up to date. I just took the snapshot today, in fact, from the Yemen Civil War website, so it's probably pretty up to date. A big ally of the Yemen government, the Hadi government, are the Saudis, who have conducted many airstrikes, destroying airports, ports, hospitals, buildings, cities, World Heritage sites. I mean, the list goes on and on. You name it. It's just terrible what the Saudis have done here in the Civil War. And also, here's a big reason why I'm surprised there isn't international attention. Al-Qaeda is even involved. See all that green there? That's actually controlled by al-Qaeda or Ansar al-Sharia in Yemen. So it's a huge problem. This war is an absolute mess. Very comparable to the Syrian civil war, but it doesn't get as much coverage because Ansar al-Sharia, it just isn't quite the same as ISIS. So how can we stem the bleeding? Well, obviously, we need to deliver more food. We need to restore their water wells. There's not a huge amount of use in just bringing water. We need to fix their wells. They do have some access. They have some aquifers. We just need to restore the wells. Restoring the wells will help bring cholera treatment, as cholera comes from contaminated water. So if we have clean water, we can start treating people with cholera more easily. There are over 100,000 people infected with cholera in Yemen right now. It's one of the worst outbreaks of cholera in the history of the world. In order to deliver food, we're going to have to rebuild the ports, which have been destroyed in the Saudi airstrikes. Of course, it'll be under the supervision of the Saudis if it makes them feel any better. And also, we should work with the Saudis to allow food imports. Main reason why there's not a lot of food coming in, not main reason, but one of them is that the Saudis have a huge embargo against Yemen right now, so not a lot of stuff's going on in the country because they don't want guns to go into the hands of rebels. So if we can work with them to allow food imports, that would be wonderful. So this is how much it will cost. The UN had an appeal of 2.1 billion US dollars. Unfortunately, only 24% of it was raised, not even a quarter of the cost they wanted, which isn't a lot compared to other things. Not even a quarter paid. So, who's going to make up the difference? The US and European taxpayers will make up the difference. The members of the EU and the United States will make for it in taxes. This is pretty much nothing. This is pocket change. $2.1 billion is nothing compared to the $40 trillion they make in purchasing power GDP on an annual basis. I mean, that's just crazy. It's nothing in comparison. Not to mention the fact that during the Syrian civil war, Europe spent 13 billion euros on the refugee crisis and in humanitarian aid. And That's just the European Union, not even the United States involved there. I think they're capable of that. Also, they won't have to necessarily pay for all of it, because some of it's already been raised, and other generous donors will, of course, pitch in as well. Feasibility. I'm not saying that all the problems can and will be solved. It's a civil war. Things are bad. It's very difficult to bring in food, considering there's a war going on. It's a war zone. It isn't going to be very easy to bring in food and water, but I think it doesn't mean that we should just stick our heads in the sand and be like, well, this is bad. We're just going to watch it happen. No, we should work towards making Yemen a better place for everyone there. Like I said, clean water will reduce cholera, and of course, if we big thing that I am a huge supporter of is the long-term economic benefits that we can get out of providing aid to Yemen. Because the first thing that can be done is we can reboot the agricultural industry of Yemen. The agricultural industry made up over half of the population, so the half of the workforce was in agriculture, and that was just completely decimated. The destruction of ports also destroyed the fishing industry. And both of those are so crucial for food that if we manage to rebuild the ports and manage to, reboot farms and reboot all these industries, I think we could watch Yemen have more growth again. You can make, and watch Yemen grow in the long term economically. And so over time, we won't have to deliver them as much aid. That is what my hope is. In terms of political support, I like to look at the Syrian Civil War. There's a lot of support there. They shoveled a lot of money into that humanitarian crisis right there, and I think they should be doing the same for Yemen. I don't know why these are necessarily two different things. It's the same thing. People need help, and they should get it. This isn't a situation they asked for, and by no means should we just let them starve to death. And also for the United States, especially, there's terrorists. There's al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is controlling regions of Yemen, and I don't think that is something that the United States wants. Not in their best interest. It's not in anyone's best interest. I don't know why the U.S. won't do anything to make it harder for terrorism to thrive. Right now, terrorism is thriving under the extreme chaotic circumstances of the Civil War. If we're able to feed these people and able to get them off their feet, stability will rise. Even though they're still in a civil war, I'm not saying it's going to completely solve that, but the more stable we make it there, it makes it harder for terrorists to take any kind of control, because they thrive off of chaos. My final words, I'm just upset how just the hypocrisy of the West and how much they seem to not really care about this problem. And I'm upset that the United States is also involved in the Saudi airstrikes indirectly, because the U.S. provides weapons to Saudi Arabia. We sell weapons to them, if I'm not mistaken. And the Saudi airstrikes have led to most of the destruction. To the ports, airports, buildings, people's homes are just being absolutely destroyed. Just absolutely destroyed. Hospitals are being destroyed. It's absolutely just heartbreaking to see. And that is the last thing that I want to say on this. Here's my works cited.